Welcome to Radio Abundance, a podcast by YIMBY Democrats for America. It's time to build again, folks. Fascism never made America great, but when progressives build, that's where you'll find American greatness. Tonight's first guest is Zellnor Myrie. A New York State Senator, Zellnor is running for mayor of New York City with a groundbreaking plan to build 1 million new homes in the next 10 years. He'll be followed by Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop. Mayor Fulop is a longtime YIMBY leader. Under his mayorship, home building in Jersey City put all 5 boroughs of New York City to shame. It's a New York-New Jersey rivalry tonight on Radio Abundance.
You're listening to Radio Abundance, a podcast by YIMBY Democrats for America. Now let's get to the show.
Please welcome your hosts for Radio Abundance, YIMBY Democrats for America co-founders Steve Boyle, Nia Johnson, and Armand Domoluski.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I hate these guys.
Hey everybody, welcome to Radio Abundance. This is our second episode. I'm Steve Boyle, and I'm here with my co-founders for YIMBY Democrats for America, Armand Domoluski and Nia Johnson. You know, we had a pretty amazing debut with our first episode with Governor Wes Moore, Secretary of Housing for Maryland Jake Day, and Congressman Jake Auchincloss. We are rising up the charts and hearing just amazing things about getting to hear from 3 great leaders, veterans, abundance-minded, young YIMBY Democrats in their late 30s and mid-40s, paving a new path forward for the Democratic Party. So we're off to a great start and excited to welcome you to this episode. You know, beyond the podcast, we're getting moving and mobilizing too. So Armand and I went to San Francisco this week. There is a new approach to zoning and upzoning specifically that is on the table right now. So Armand and I went to City Hall to chat about it in a little bit, share some comments, and tell the city and the Planning Commission and everyone in the audience why San Francisco needs to build. Armand, I'm wondering if you can tell folks a little bit about our San Francisco adventure this week.
Yeah, well, so I live in San Francisco. I've lived here for 10 years. And as long as I've lived here, I've been going to the San Francisco Planning Commission. There was a certain moment when I was there where I said to somebody next to me, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've been doing the same thing and hearing the same stuff in the same room for 10 years of my life. Because I started FEMB like when it first really started. The context for this is that every city in California has to do what's called its regional housing needs assessment. San Francisco is doing the upzoning so you can build more housing and more density in a city that's required by the state housing plan. And this was like one of the steps required to pass it. It needed to pass through the Planning Commission, which it did. And now we'll go on to the Board of Supervisors who has to approve it. And then the mayor has to sign it.
Getting to the heart of what we were there to talk about, San Francisco does have a new plan on the table that is a sea change from decades past, right? So San Francisco is required by the state now to build 82,000 new units. Mayor Lurie has introduced a plan that would upzone areas like the Marina, Cow Hollow, on Geary Street, but also have something called density decontrol all across San Francisco's west side. So the entire western half of San Francisco, which was built to be a New York, right? It has the same grid as New York. It has Golden Gate Park, which is built by the same folks, about the same size as Central Park, by the beach. The west, you've got Golden Gate views to the north. That whole area is suburbs. And what the new plan says is that even if you don't necessarily change heights in certain areas, on the same building, in the same plot, at the same heights that are already in law, you can have higher density of the amount of people who live there. So it is a massive change, potentially, in the trajectory of San Francisco building housing.
That's the thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that, like, even if the area is zoned a certain way, where it's like, yeah, it's totally legal to build up to this many stories, if you have density control, they'll say, well, but only so many people can live here. So really, the only stuff that works is like maybe a very tall mansion, right? Because legally speaking, you can't really build an apartment, no matter how much zoning capacity you have, if there are controls on the amount of density of units.
And this is one of the things going on in New York politics right now, and something that's holding that city back. And the reason why, if you want to build in Manhattan, yeah, okay, you can build taller than most other places. Manhattan's filled with tall buildings, but the majority of the buildings, especially the most iconic buildings in Manhattan today, would be illegal to build if we built them today. A lot of times for that reason, right? Even if you're allowed to build that height, there's limits on the amount of people that can live there. And that's where you get a housing crisis.
And I think that's kind of like when people like complain about billionaires row and like, oh, like there's all these like high rises for rich people. And it's like, well, the laws are making it so that there's only high rises for rich people because like if you build a high rise and you're limiting the amount of people who can live in that high rise legally, then somebody has to offset that difference in cost.
Yeah, something that I would love left NIMBYs and growthers and folks to know is just how much the current system benefits massive corporations, billionaire apartments, and oligarchy. So if the barriers to building a home are so high that you have to be a big corporation to have the funding and the patience to do it, if building anything means negotiating with the city and having government connections and greasing the wheel, well, then only big and corrupt companies can accomplish that. And it's small developers, community-oriented developers, new entrants into the field who are locked out on that. And then scarcity-wise, if you're only building enough for 10% of the population, well, guess what? The richest 10% are going to get those apartments. Build for 20% and the richest 30% will. Build for 100% of the population and everyone can compete for an apartment.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's what I think gets me. I think about a lot of like the left NIMBY argument about like anti-housing, because it's like at the end of the day, like if you're concerned about gentrification, like you're never going to beat money. Like at the end of the day, like if you're going to restrict the amount of people who live in a certain place, like it's going to be the most marginalized people who are going to get pushed out because they don't have money because society is making it systemically harder for them to make money. So it's like, yeah, like if you build less apartments, then yeah, you're not going to get less people gentrifying. You're just throwing oil on the fire. And then, yeah.
Wealth finds a way. The rich will continue to have options. It'll be the rest of us who don't. We have to broaden opportunity by broadening the options for everybody. You know, it's funny, as I was leaving the meeting, somebody chased after me that was kind of anti-YIMBY and wanted to have like a kind of a little mini, but also in reasonably good faith argument about it. And I asked them some questions. I asked them why they thought the rent was so high. And, they started talking about the need to build more public housing, right? And criticizing the state government, going back to Jerry Brown for not doing that. And so I said, well, this is an area where we agree, right? I want the market to build housing because it can, and that will reduce everybody's rates. But it also takes a hot second, right? And as was pointed out in the meeting, existing housing always usually going to be cheaper than new housing. It's just that you only get existing housing by building it anew and then building even newer housing, and then that formerly new housing becomes existing housing. And guess what? It's cheaper. But so I'm bringing this up and I'm saying, well, let's find this common ground. Let's agree on this. And I start talking about public housing. And she says, well, yes, but did you know about these two, Section Native apartments, and there was gang violence? And suddenly it becomes clear, hey, you don't want anything. You're actually not saying don't build market rate housing, only build government housing. You don't want anything to change. And I think both those things have to change. And this reminds me, Armando, of what you talked about, which I wonder if you could share a little bit, because you were making the point that, hey, there's people there saying, don't let the market build, the government needs to build this. Well, if we need to build 82,000 units and it costs $1 million right now to build a public housing unit in San Francisco, which is its own problem we need to fix, that's going to be, I'm going to do fast math here. I think that's about 6 times the budget of San Francisco city government, which is already
very big,
higher budget than larger cities like Denver.
There's actually a RAND study recently, and what you see with that study is that it costs multiple times to build housing in California, the same housing that it does in Texas, whether it's public or private. But then the gap between public and private is also much higher in California than it is Texas. So not only do we in California just make it hard to build housing, period, we make it harder to build publicly funded and supported and subsidized housing.
Yeah. And I think like there's a way to look at this in a way that's like, I think reframing like, oh, private developers taking over, and more so like let the corporations do the dirty work for you. Like, if they build, they're going to build until like their cost equals their revenues. But like, that's going to take a long time. But even just getting to a point where like a developer's like cost equals their revenues, that means rents have to be the average rent is going to be much lower than it is now. So it may not work for everybody, but it's going to work for a decent amount of people. And then it's easier for for the government to pick up the slack.
You know, Armand, you also made the point that I really loved, that building more housing, letting the market build housing and the government to build more housing is the progressive position. So we had Senator Elizabeth Warren join us on YIMBYs for Harris and tell us that YIMBYism is Econ 101. AOC is a YIMBY. AOC, I'm staring at a quote right now. She says, for decades, thanks to restrictive zoning laws, we simply haven't built enough housing. I'm staring at another message from AOC where she talks about why we need to build multifamily mixed income buildings, the kind that Zellnor Myrie is about to talk about in our interview with him. So this is the progressive opinion. And, you know, in San Francisco, we talk a lot about the mods versus the progs, but I don't concede for a second that folks who are calling themselves progressive in San Francisco are progressive for two big reasons, right? One is, if you want your neighborhood to stay the same, to freeze in amber, if you are anti-change of all kinds, that is not progressive. That is core of conservatism. If you favor a system where only the big corporations and the well-connected can build things, that is an oligarchical system. And by the way, the origins of progressivism, so going back over a century now, but the origin of the progressive movement, progressives are a little bit the original YIMBYs and a little bit the original data nerds, right? Progressivism was folks saying, much as we are now, hey, there's elements of populism we love. We love the call to fix things, but we also believe that by understanding data, by taking a rational and scientific approach to the world that we live in, by learning more about it and learning and leaning into problem solving, that you can unleash and actually realize the kind of goals that a more populist mind sets, but isn't successful at accomplishing. Progressives are the original data nerds. That is where the movement begins. I think I care a lot about recapturing that, but I also care a lot about saying, hey, you can't outflank us on progressivism while begging for a system that doesn't change, where everything stays the same. Armand, can you tell us just a little bit more about what you wanted to tell people when you called YIMBYs the progressive position, and also just the message that you wanted to share with the San Francisco Planning Commission?
Well, I really wanted the Planning Commission to understand that building more housing was the progressive position because it's the policy that helps working class people, right? Like, there's an enormous amount of studies that's been done on this, and like the overwhelming consensus, like even the studies that are somewhat critical of YIMBY, they nitpick, but none of them, as far as I know, dispute the basic idea that like overall building more housing reduces rent. Like, I've seen studies that are wielded by people who are like, I hate YIMBYs. This study proves YIMBYs are wrong. And the study usually says things like, oh, well, if you upzone, that doesn't mean prices don't come down. Prices come down. And then what you find is the study says, well, this upzoning was small, and so it didn't build a lot of housing, which like is a YIMBY argument. Or you see studies that say like, well, what we found is like, while it reduces rents in a larger area, it might not reduce rents like right next door. But even those studies, which again, lots of people come out and say, oh, that proves YIMBYs are wrong, still agrees that building more housing reduces rents overall.
I think it just shows I think the lack of data literacy. I think it's concerning because I think it coincides with an overall decline of intellectualism in American society. We spend waste so much time explaining basic data, basic economic to people who are educated. And I think it's just concerning. It's weird.
Well, speaking of data and numbers, that was one of the subjects of my message to the Planning Commission, which was a couple numbers in particular, namely numbers like 2030 and 270.
For the listening audience, you will quickly learn this is Steve's favorite obsession. It's a very good and important obsession, but I just think it's very funny. He drops this like every conversation. I could be like, what should we get for lunch? Like, Armand, in 2030, we might not be able to have lunch because
We might not be able
we
to
don't have the electoral college votes.
We might not be able to have coffee and bananas and we might or any tropical fruits that we can't grow in the United
Actually,
States.
I think I brought up 2030 first.
Oh,
Steve just like ran with it because I saw the look on his face. He just like it off, and I think that was like a canon event for him.
you accepted him.
Yeah. Through that,
I
put it on a right on a
scratched
T.
Things brain.
Alley from Nia to Steve, because we have to drive this message because the stakes are as enormous as it gets. Again, when the 2030 census hits, the electoral vote count for each state will change. So once you hit 2030, when you get to the 2032 election, the 2036 election, and the 2040 election, before any chance of a reprieve from the 2040 census, Democrats, as Armand pointed out, will be able to win every state Biden won, sweep the blue wall, and lose every election that decade. And so the reason I bring it up again and again is to say, hey, of all these things we talk about NIMBYism versus YIMBYism, everything you want to say about shadows and height and density and developers, and isn't it better to build public housing? All of that starts to pale in comparison when the future of the Democratic Party and the future of democracy and America itself are on the line. And we're seeing some pretty major threats to our economy right now, both like the stock market, but the value of the dollar, the bond market. Peril is here, and peril is going to escalate in coming years if we don't surge population. And even a transformative bill, a transformative new approach to zoning like San Francisco's got right now, that will reverse decades of decline, isn't big enough or fast enough to meet that moment. But you can't meet the moment if you don't know that that's the moment you're in, and that's the deadline that's looming, and we got to get going now.
And like, we have an advantage in the sense that like blue cities are fun, attractive places to live. Like, we don't have to necessarily sell people on living in New York or San Francisco or LA or DC. Like, the name speaks for itself.
It drives me like nuts when people are like, who's going to want to live in these cities? I'm like, why do you think they're expensive? It's like that Yogi Berra quote, like, nobody goes there. It's too popular, right?
Yes. Like, I don't want to poo-poo on other people's preferences. Like, we want people to do what they want, do whatever makes them feel happy. I'm saying personally for me, what makes me happy is a bunch of like cosmopolitan hipster bullshit.
Look, I am also, I in my personal life, for the choices I want to make, am totally in elitist cosmopolitan. But I think the thing is that everyone should be able to make that choice for themselves and have the option to realize the neighborhood and the environment that is most conducive to the life they want to live, and also try other ones and see if maybe that different direction is actually really cool. They should be able to express themselves in that way. So I don't think everybody has to live in a big city, but if people who want to can, then guess what? Then your suburb can be more suburban. Your rural area can be more rural, because all those city dwellers that now have been, kicked out of the city because they can't afford it, aren't trying to turn your suburb or your rural area into a city, because the city can be a city. And on this note of, blue states and blue cities are really attractive to people, that does give us an important leg up as we think about the electoral stakes. And I want to add a little bit of historical context here and go way back, because I do think not only this idea that there are stakes to population and that huge electoral ramifications to who moves where, this has come up before in American history. The bad news is it was the lead up to the Civil War. But this was the case when America started to expand west and add more states. The competition over whether those would be free states or slave states drove a bit of a population war. So you get first something like the Missouri Compromise, which says, every state below this line is a slave state, every state above this line is a free state. And then people start moving in order to found new states and essentially compete over whether the Electoral College will be ruled by pro-slavery or pro-abolition. And then, you add Texas and California as this giant slave state and this giant free state. And then you get to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 and what's called Bleeding Kansas, where Congress now, at that point, after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, left it up to the settlers of states whether they would choose to be free or slave. And so what you got was people who wanted more slave states to be added, moving there so that Kansas and Nebraska would vote to be slave states. And you got folks, especially from New England, folks on the pro-abolition side, moving there to compete to make them free states, and essentially moving places and surging populations to decide whether America would be a country of slavery or a country of freedom. And that led to a lot of violence, which is called Bleeding Kansas. And that is not something that I want to repeat, but I do want to sort of throw down the gauntlet of like a kind of a competition for population to determine the electoral future of the United States is something that I overtly think we need, and that both parties should compete in, not to kill each other, but as a race to the top, which is to say that blue states and red states should both be competing for population, not to stop people from moving, but to offer more attractive destinations, to say, how can we build states that have cheaper homes, cheaper energy, better jobs, better amenities, and better quality of life, right? Letting the market build those housing and solve those problems. Also the government building those, building solutions to those problems and offering more attractions. And this notion hits, I think, two things that are really relevant to this podcast. The first is Congressman Auchincloss last week talked about how to make construction cheaper, to make prefab and modular homes actually a thing. Those industries need a demand signal, right? There's not enough demand right now for them to say, let's invest in this, let's double down on this, let's make this a thing. If governments in blue states and red states alike, but especially blue states, start to build and build more at scale and build more in order to attract more residents, if you start building at government scale prefab and modular, you start to send that demand signal. Now that industry is built, now the private market can take advantage of that, and suddenly prefab and modular becomes a thing. But also something that Zellnor Myrie talked about that I think a lot about is the idea of amenity. And how can government build more public amenities by building more housing? So my favorite part of the conversation with Zellnor Myrie is that he has a plan. And by the way, I mentioned this to Stephen Fulop, and he said, hey, we did this too in Jersey City, which is to say you can build in the same lot as a school or library, in the same building as a school or a library, build mixed use, mixed income public housing, where you're building affordable housing and public housing to immediately solve the crisis. You're building market rate housing because that solves a long-term problem. It subsidizes those affordable units. And by the way, if developers are so greedy, shouldn't the taxpayer be greedy as well and start to make a little revenue from building things? But also, you start to subsidize amenities and stack things on each other and be able to build more features for citizens for the whole city in the same building. So a school and a library is the key example with Zellnor Myrie and Stephen Fulop. But I also think grocery stores, gyms, pools, rooftop parks, places to shower and use the bathroom, food courts, food halls, coffee shops, right? Retail that you sell to the market, retail that government doesn't sell. Zellnor's rival in New York wants to build government-run grocery stores. Well, if you're going to do that, these are the buildings for them, right? The idea to me is government can not just build affordable housing immediately, can not just build mixed income housing for all those benefits, can actually build public amenities for the whole city that make everyone's lives better in those same spaces, defraying some of those costs with the market rate housing, but also using that sort of vertical structure to expand your opportunities and the cool stuff and social life you can have in a city.
Yeah. So like on TikTok, like there's always like somebody like on TikTok that's talked about like, we need public spaces where people don't have to spend money. Because like there is stuff to do in New York. Like a lot of the places where you can just go and hang out just like randomly require money, especially after an hour. And I think it would be nice to have more public spaces where you can go to where you don't have to spend money.
Yeah. Everybody wants this. Everybody talks about this idea of the third place, right? But yeah, that's hard for the market to build. Government should be building those. And it's public parks and it's public plazas, but those can be indoor spaces too and rooftop spaces too. And that's something that you can and must make happen if we want to lean into better places to live, better quality of life, and also doing something about the loneliness crisis in this country, which is devastating our culture and our
You know what
politics.
we need? We need government-owned clubs.
Yes, that's right.
Have Charlie XX open it.
The U.S. Department of Getting Down.
The U.S. Department of Jams and Bops.
That's, you're saying clubs and you mean clubs, but I also think about the structures of, I don't know if you've ever been to a private club. They're actually very disappointing because I thought they'd be a lot cooler, and they're basically a restaurant and a library. But that idea actually of a place.
Oh, you mean private club, not as in clubbing.
Yeah,
Not
like
clubs.
social
Like
clubs,
you mean like
right?
the emo club.
Yeah.
Like actually, there's nothing in that model. It's basically like a place where you can work, a place where you can hang out. There's a restaurant, and sometimes they do events. That is something that should be public. That is something that cities should purposefully build for people, because people need places to work. People need places to hang out. People need, like you're saying, places that they can meet each other and not buy something. Places where you can buy something if you want, but you don't have to. I think that's actually really important for what it means to live in a city and go places, and will enrich how people feel about that city, whether they like it, whether they think the government works.
You're listening to Radio Abundance, a podcast by YIMBY Democrats for America.
As a San Francisco-based artist and theater maker, I had a front row seat as our housing crisis and the scarcity we demanded and the bidding war that unleashed devastated our most vulnerable citizens, right? Sent my trans friends and artists and actors to the streets, sent the builders of our culture fleeing to other states, and meant that a kid growing up persecuted in Alabama couldn't find their safe haven in San Francisco. That is a fundamental betrayal of our promise as a city. And housing is the only way to make life affordable for San Franciscans and keep our culture alive. But if that doesn't move you, please consider the national stakes. Our electoral power to defy Trump comes from population, and in the city and state, we have bled out residents. So as you watch him tank our economy, tear up the Constitution, and disappear people from American streets to Salvadorian concentration camps, know that when the 2030 census hits, California will lose 4 electoral votes, meaning every year, every presidential election, we could sweep the blue wall, win every state we won in 2020, and lose every election until 2044. If we go that long, will we get another shot? Will we see another Democratic president? Will the Republic endure? We say often here, as goes San Francisco, so goes the nation. Consider today that as goes San Francisco, so goes the world, and billions of people not yet born are counting on us to do something as simple as to say yes to new homes and welcome to new neighbors. Thank you.
Now that we know the stakes, let's get on with the show. Our first guest tonight is Zellnor Myrie. He's a Brooklyn native, an affordable housing advocate, now running for mayor of New York City. He's got a big plan to build 1 million homes in the next 10 years. Please welcome to Radio Abundance, Zellnor Myrie. And to kick things off, here's Steve Boyle.
Zellnor, we're obviously talking today because you're running for the mayor of New York City. You have a plan to pretty mass upzoning, which is exciting for obviously all of us in the YIMBY movement and the abundance movement. It's worth calling out, a big part of the plan is also building a lot of public housing, which is obviously appealing to any of us as Democrats and on the left for tackling that urgent issue in the immediate term as well as the long term. But there's a particular part of the policy that I want to ask about and hear about that I think is really innovative and exciting, which is you're proposing, if I understand right, for the city to build public developments that are mixed income and mixed use, which is to say, in the same building, you've got subsidized units to help people out and deliver rent relief to vulnerable folks right away. You've got market rate units, which will alleviate the rental crisis for everybody and help raise revenue and subsidize those units. And you want to build it on schools and libraries. So not just taking advantage of public land, but also public amenities in the same building. So instead of a 15-minute city, you've got a 1-minute building where your elevator connects you to your school and your community. And this idea to me seems genuinely new and incredibly exciting, both for tackling the crisis, but also for unlocking some of the opportunities within it. So I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the details of how that would work.
This to me is one of the components of the plan that is common sense. When we think about our cities and where people want to live and why they make the policy choices of I'm going to stay here or I'm going to go there, it's because not just an affordable unit, but because I have easy access to schools and libraries and cultural institutions and grocery stores and other amenities. And to the extent feasible, the public should be investing in that type of development. And that is what we are proposing as one of our Rebuild NYC plan. The city has taken some steps in some neighborhoods to get this done. We just saw in Manhattan, affordable housing built on top of a library, which is incredible. This is, I think, the highest use of our public land for us to have really strong institutions grounding it out, and then having mixed income where individuals of all income brackets can afford to be in that space. You think about our New York City Housing Authority, our public housing stock, where we have hundreds of thousands of residents that live, but their capital needs for this housing stock is close to $70 billion. This investment from the federal government over decades, money that we're not going to get from this special administration, certainly, but that we also haven't gotten from previous administrations. And so if we're talking about generating revenue, we have to talk about mixed income. That is a necessary prerequisite for us to do that in this space. And we have a lot of land where we can do so, and we can do it without displacing the residents. We can have them have deep agency in this process to be partnered in how this is being built, but then to be the beneficiary of those amenities. And we have opportunities to do that all throughout the city. I'm really excited for this part of our plan.
Why do you think this is such a unique and novel idea? In the sense that, when I talk to, obviously all of us in the sort of YIMBY movement understand what building more market rate rent units does for everybody. But when I talk to folks on the left, we agree on the need to build public housing. But then, I hear a lot about greedy developers, and I always think, man, if you can make that money from this, shouldn't the government get into that game? It could use some money for helping people and for building subsidized units. So I'm just, I'm curious, do you kind of stand alone on this? And what's the possibilities and potential for if the government is able to generate revenue by building housing?
Look, I think that there are legitimate fears for people who have seen the government fail in this regard in the past. I used to represent Brownsville in my state Senate district. I represented 23 public housing developments where I took constituent case after constituent case of NYCHA failing to meet their needs, dilapidated apartments, unhealthy conditions inside the hallways and the elevators. I've walked those hallways. I've seen those broken doors. I've seen the broken roofs. So if you have been living in these conditions, or communities that live in these conditions, what faith do you have in government to get the job done? And to actually solve the problem. So I don't disparage or am I upset at people who don't have faith that this isn't just going to be a scheme for others to make money. It is incumbent on us, leadership, to prove to them that we can do this and do it in a different way, in a way that actually generates income and revenue for an authority that needs that, but also in a way that does not displace tenants, but gives them the opportunity to do it. I'm very proud of my record on tenant protections and standing up for people. I've been with my mom in housing court on my own 2 feet, trying to prevent her from being evicted. And I was a leader in the state legislature on the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, some of the strongest tenant protections we've seen in New York in half a century. So I come at this from a place of credibility, but one that really wants to get at solving the problem. All of the above, that's the answer. And if I'm not willing to do all of the above, I think it is a wholly unserious approach.
I 100% agree. Because I think there are different types of housing consumers, and everyone needs to be served at the same time. And if that doesn't happen, that's where we get the problems that we have today. But I think to follow up, I think housing often goes hand in hand with transit. And I want to know, how does transit fit into your overall plan for 1 million homes in New York?
We have the benefit of having one of the most robust public transit systems, not just in the country, but in the world. And I have been a consumer and customer of our MTA for my entire life here in the city. I don't drive. This is how I get around. I take the buses, I take the trains, just like most New Yorkers. And we have opportunities near our transit system to do it more development. This is a phrase that in YIMBY spaces, I think is pretty common. Transit-oriented development is something that I've been supportive of in the state legislature as well, because we need a regional approach to abating the affordability crisis. We have places in this city and around the city and our neighboring counties that could be doing more on development, and doing so in close to transit that will help relieve the pressure. But even in the city where we have neighborhoods that have really good access to public transit, there's been resistance to development, building. That has been the case even in my own district, where I've had to stand up and say, no, this is good for everybody. This is good for the community. Everyone should be able to benefit from being close to transit and having good schools and having access to parks. And so part of my plan is to ensure that everyone is sharing the solution to our affordability crisis. And that includes doing a lot more that is closer to our public transit system.
Yeah. And how do you address, I know that we have an amazing public transit system, best in the country, but even then still have gaps in our coverage. Have you thought about how to address those coverage gaps, making 2 fare zones into 1 fare zones?
So we have the unfortunate distinction of having the slowest buses in the country. That to me is an embarrassment as a New Yorker. I hate to even see that fact, that we have the slowest buses in the country. So one of the things that we have to do is to the extent that the city has jurisdiction over the streetscape, because the MTA is controlled by the state, but the city has some jurisdiction here, we need to be making our buses faster. And there's some things that we can do, whether that is adjusting how our traffic lights turn to ensure that they are prioritizing our buses to get them through, whether it's dedicated bus lanes that are actually enforced so that people can make their way through, whether it's rapid transit, where we have seen further extensions of train lines that have stopped, but where the bus rapid transit continues to go and serves as a good substitute for what a subway would be. I'd like to see that expanded. In fact, New York City right now is currently not following the law. We passed a law a couple of years ago that would have an expansive bus system where we would be adding many, many miles to our bus transit network every year. The current mayor said that this was something that he believed in. He has not followed the law in that respect. I want to change that to ensure that in these 2 fare zones, in these places where public transit isn't as easily accessible, a cost-effective way to do this is to increase our bus service. As you may know, it is incredibly expensive to build the new subways and to extend our lines. And so, before we get the capital investment to make that happen, I think we have a cost-effective way to do that with our bus system.
It sounds like you're very focused on earning the trust to be able both to allow citizens to build housing and the government to build housing. And I'm curious both how you plan to earn that trust and then what's built into the plan in order to live up to it.
Often people see our plan and they say, well, this is too big. You can never get it done in a city like this. You have too many opposing forces. Are you prepared to be hated by entire neighborhoods and communities? And to me, this is a mentality that is born out of a failure of leadership. We used to do big things in New York City. We built the Empire State Building in 13 months. This is New York City. Come on now. We can do big things here. And if you don't think that we can do big things, then you can stay in that corner and be a naysayer. I refuse to accept that. And I believe that if we are going to be a city where people can raise their family, where you can start your first job, where you can get your first apartment, or where if you were born and raised here, you can stay and see your future here, it's going to require for us to do some tough work. That is why I have centered housing in my campaign, so that when we win, we will have a political mandate to utilize every tool at our disposal to get this done. So that means I'm going to have to continue to sell what our vision is, even after getting into City Hall. A part of why we saw such a struggle with trying to get the City of Yes proposal over the finish line was that the Adams administration was otherwise occupied. I made it really hard to sell that vision. That is not what we're going to be doing. Now, we're going to be focused on this from day one. We're going to have a war room-like approach, interagency meetings at the top of every week, a constant-like transparency where people see how many units we preserved and created. And I'm going to be using that bully pulpit to say that we got to continue to build, we got to continue to preserve, and we also have to protect our tenants. I have proposed an expansion of our right to counsel program that it was a really good initiative, gives people counsel if they're facing eviction, but it has never been fully funded. I want to fully fund that to ensure that everyone is getting that legal counsel in those proceedings. And I want to extend it to our homeowners who are facing deep debt and who are facing foreclosure. There is still work to be done on the preservation side, but we got to do a lot more on the creation side. And that is what Rebuild NYC is about.
Yeah.
So Zellnor, this is a very exciting plan, right? Speaks to both my entrepreneurial brain and my bleeding heart liberal brain. Brass tacks here, I think latest polls have you at about 1%. So how do you win?
I'm going to leave it to the professionals to do the prognostication or what the polls mean. If you look at previous polling at this cycle in the past couple of mayoral elections, the individual that is at the top usually is not the one that prevails. And so I'm really focused on putting our vision out to as many New Yorkers as possible. It is very early in this race. For those of us who consume politics, we have been in this and in the mix and the firmament for many months. But for most New York voters, they're just now starting to turn their attention to this race. And we, I think, have built a foundation to be ready to talk to folks about our vision. We've raised close to $3.7 million. We've gotten contributions from every single city council district, every community district in the city. I've been making my way out to every borough, talking to voters, getting live interactions. And I'm really excited because now people are turning their attention. They're going to see what our vision is, that we want to build more housing, that we want after school for all, that we want an all of the above approach to public safety. That's what New Yorkers wanted this moment. And let me just say as an added commentary that people are expecting the Democratic Party to deliver for them in this moment. Not just to pay them lip service, but to actually provide solutions to their everyday problems, to help bring down the cost of living, practical ways to get this done. And that is what my vision for this city is.
Yeah. And on that note, there is this whole issue of cost of living and cost of creation. And then there's another facet of it on the outside of the housing side around permitting and government red tape. What do you think about what's your plan for streamlining the processes for permit applications and licensure?
This is an excellent question, and it does get to the execution of the vision. And I start with, we got to do a lot more recruiting and retention for our agencies that are responsible for this execution. When you think about our Department of City Planning, you think about our Housing Preservation Agency, they need more personnel. There are applications right now that are sitting on desks simply because they cannot be processed. And that to me is a shame and a failure of government. So we got to do better on that front. I want to be our city's biggest cheerleader. We have an amazing workforce, people that come to work for this city every day, want to deliver for everyday New Yorkers, but they need help. And I want to get them the help that they need. Now, there are also red tape that prevents smaller developers from building. And if you want to build from 6 stories below, the city makes it incredibly difficult for you to do that. And you have to hop through many more hoops than some of the larger developments. In my Rebuild NYC plan, I plan to cut some of that red tape. But I also want to give folks more access to capital. We have a housing development corporation that I think can be playing a much bigger role in assisting our smaller developers to get this done. And that is something that we also delineate in our plan so that we can cut down on the red tape. We can give them more access to capital, and then we can hopefully have people that are in our city agencies help process those applications.
I want to bring us to a finale with a final question in a second, but you said something very important that conjures a penultimate question, if you'll allow it. You mentioned small developers, right? And so a lot of the conversation around abundance, and some of the opposition to it talks about, both big developers, but also sort of monopolistic approaches generally, and just this idea of resisting big corporations. And I think the focus on smaller entities who haven't been able to get in the game, who don't have the resources that those bigger, whether it's developers or, more broadly, bigger corporations have, it seems really key here, both for unlocking this construction, but also for a more competitive market and a more just market. You spoke a little bit about those policies to support smaller developers, but I am very curious if you can just speak more to this idea of small developers and smaller entrepreneurs and how to get them in the game tackling this.
This is a really important point for a couple of reasons. One, we know that we have to scale development and that every development cannot look the same, and that every property, every neighborhood cannot have really high towers, as I think sometimes this gets caricatured as. What we also need to be cognizant of is that smaller developers are often people of color. They're often women who are looking for opportunities to enter this space, but do not have the networks, do not have the connections, do not have the access to capital that some of their counterparts do. And this, to me, is just as important to give these individuals this opportunity, particularly in an environment where we are undergoing attacks from the federal government on diversity and equity and inclusion. This is an opportunity for us to put our money where our mouth is and to say we can help with the affordability crisis. We can also give people opportunities in this space as well. And that's why I'm, again, really excited about the opportunity for an all of the above approach to solving this crisis.
So I want to close on this. It's been a pleasure. For anybody who's listening to this and thinking, hey, this really aligns with me, I'd love to put this guy in a position to be able to deliver on these ideas. What can they be doing? What do you need from them?
Please visit Zellnor.nyc, Zellnor.nyc. You'll see our vision, you'll see our plans, you see what we've already done, and you'll see what we're trying to do. We are in a really important moment, not just in the city, but in this entire country. We are truly undergoing unprecedented attacks on foundational rights, things that we have taken for granted in the past. And we have an opportunity to do something about it. We can step up in this moment and show that local governance matters, that you can still do big things at the municipal level. And that is exactly what I'm trying to do as the next mayor of this city. I would not be who I am today if I did not have people looking out for me, if I did not go to after school, if I did not have a really good public school, if my mom didn't have an affordable place to live so that she can put food on the table. That same opportunity is being lost for so many people in this city in this moment, and we don't have to accept it. We can do something different. We can go in a different direction. If you want to help me get there, Zellnor.nyc.
Zellnor, it's been a delight to chat with you and learn a little bit more about both your plans and your heart. It's been a fast conversation, but we hope to continue it and come join us again. And thank you for your time today.
Yeah, your platform's awesome. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. This was so great. There's a lot of things in politics. I got into this because I care about the policy and I want to get the thing done. I want to be in a position to get it done. And we have to go through a lot of other things in order to get there. And so I just want to say thank you for giving us this opportunity and to speak to your audience, because it's going to help us. Every bit counts. So thank you. I hope this isn't the last time. Looking forward to being back.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome. He's super cool. I really liked how thorough he is. And I think I really appreciate it because he doesn't seem like a bullshitter, and he seems very interested in the actual policy.
He's such a dork. I love it.
I feel like that's what you need. Okay. I'm tired of charismatic, people who don't know things. Okay. Politics has enough of that. Okay. More nerds in politics. I think Zellnor is awesome, and he is my fave.
The plan, but the level of, I think, courage and vision to come out and say, hey, we have to build, as New York City, we have to set a goal of building 1 million units in the next decade. And the market is part of that solution, and the government part of that solution, and some of the creative ideas to accomplish that he throws out, and doing that at the same time as he is building on a whole career around renter and tenant protections. It's absolutely the path forward for New York.
Yeah. We need more housing. We need more affordable housing. And because at the end of the day, it's like, we are, okay, New York, we're the greatest city in America. Of course, people want to live here. So we should make it easy for people to live here. And then we are still become an even greater city. And then no one can beat us because we're amazing.
I mean, the whole idea that like, well, one, San Francisco is the best city, but I understand.
Lies, fairy tales,
we're just
falsehoods.
way too small. Like we need to be a lot. I always tell people like, I love San Francisco. I want more of it. But, you know, New York City is like over 8 million people. Like the idea that 1 million units is this crazy idea that's like way too ambitious. Like that's so silly. Like he's the only one talking about the scale that like your city actually needs.
Yeah, like we need like, I think that's what frustrates me when people are like, oh, like we've built enough, because I see like a crane in my neighborhood, or I see a couple cranes in my neighborhood. Like the couple cranes that you're seeing on your walk to work is that ain't shit. I'm sorry, that ain't shit. Like you need way more than that. Like we are like the most that we have ever built in a decade has been the 20s. Like, like I don't think anyone has been alive to see that scale of building. So like anyone who's like, oh, we have enough, or I see this, I see that, like your experience doesn't mean shit right now. Like, I'm so sorry. Like we believe in lived experience and stuff, but like if you haven't been alive to see the scale that we need, your experience does not mean shit.
Zellnor referenced the building of the Empire State Building, right, which was built in New York in the 30s in less than 14 months, which is the kind of ambition and kind of growth that we need. But it's also a reminder that if you've seen pictures of the Empire State going up compared to the neighborhood that surrounds it, it's ridiculous in the best way. You look at it now and it fits in. And I was just talking to somebody the other day who was saying, hey, you can build like that in New York, but you could never build like that on the west side of San Francisco. And I had to remind them, hey, when the Empire State Building was built, it reached 100 stories. Guess what? Every building around it was maybe max like 15. I mean, it more than 6x'd the height of Manhattan. And of course, inspired everything that followed. And I think it's a lesson that neighborhood character, A, changes, but B, it can extend skyward. It's not limited to what it is today. That character can grow, can develop, can enhance itself. And we love the neighborhood character of Manhattan today. It is the greatest city in America. It is our greatest tourist destination. And that happened because somebody was bold enough to say, I want to build a building that's 7 times the height of the other buildings around me. And everyone said, oh, that's cool, let's add more. After it was built, while it was being built, there were plenty of NIMBYs. It's just that they couldn't stop it at the time. And what a great thing that they couldn't. And I think that's a lesson for the whole of New York now, as well as Manhattan, where construction is constrained, maybe a little less than other places, but majorly constrained.
Like it's kind of like Manhattanites against the Manhattanization of Manhattan.
100% what it is. That's 100%.
I'm just like, I'm like, if you guys don't like tall buildings, like you can try Long Island.
And Zellnor brought up the point too that that our current regime of how we build, like we were saying earlier, is only available to the rich and big corporations. And that doesn't just lock out small developers. A lot of the small developers and the small entrepreneurs it locks out, and community-oriented builders it locks out, are women, are people of color, are folks who are locked out of not just benefiting their city and people like them, but taking the next step forward in their lives and leaving their mark on the world because we have a system that favors incumbents.
One thing about that I think about a lot is prior to passing like a lot of ADU laws in California, a lot of developers at the time said like, sure, it's fine, but I don't think there will be a lot of people doing. They were wrong. They were wrong specifically because most of the companies who sprouted up do ADUs were new entrants. And a lot of them were younger, more diverse, more women. And so like a system that protects like existing incumbents is a system that keeps people who are currently marginalized.
Yeah, because like all the laws were racist when the incumbents were entering the market.
And this reminds me, this past weekend, we had a number of folks from YIMBY Democrats for America attend
Bernie's rally in Los Angeles. They took public transit there, caught, Bernie and AOC and Ro Khanna and YIMBY young Gen Z Congressman Maxwell Frost on the drums. There were folks who saw Bernie at Coachella. And I really think, and this is relevant both to our national politics, it's also relevant to the New York conversation, because, look, so Eric Adams, thank you for City of Yes. And also you are a corrupt and insane person. Andrew Cuomo did squat for housing as governor, and his plans for New York are also hugely disappointing on housing. I'm pleased, at least, that one of the sort of upstart rivals of Zellnor, Zoran Mondami, is at the very least does, to a much smaller degree, have some building in his plans and does have ambitious plans for building some public housing. To me, the union of those two guys, who, by the way, are friends, like they may be frenemies in the race, but they are buds and talk a lot, and like each other a lot, and have some different policies, but are also very complementary. And that's more of the spirit we need. But that union behind Zellner's ambition for market building and renter protections and government building, mixed with Zoran's ambition for public building, and some of his really clever and charismatic approaches to campaigning that I think are really strong. Like that union of them, that friendship, that's the future of the party. Abundance, fight oligarchy, and defeating fascism are one single movement to me. One single movement that says we need to reject decline, tear down incumbent privilege, where people who've made it, whether that's a super gajillionaire billionaire taking over the federal government or a million millionaires taking over their city and freezing other people out. We have to reject incumbent privilege, reject this idea of pulling the ladder up behind you, and build a fully realized progressive vision of American abundance, where everyone has what they need. Everyone has the freedom to create and build and articulate what they need and introduce their solutions. And a government is empowered to get in on the action and build and do big things. To me, it's one movement. To me, it's the future of the party. To me, it's the only way to take the country back. Sometimes I'm asked, we have two twin goals here, right? Build America and defeat fascism. Which of those is more important? Well, I think defeating fascism certainly has its world historical stakes, but they're also prerequisites for each other. We can't defeat fascism if we don't build up blue states right now, increase our population, and show why a progressive model for government works and is better. And we certainly can't build America without defeating fascism. It was maybe possible in the final weeks of January to think, oh, Trump might do this. Trump wants to usher in a golden age. He wants to build these freedom cities. Well, not going to get very far if he tanks the economy, tanks the dollar, and builds a world where you have to, give him a $5 million donation to be able to meet with him and get your little goodies. That's not going to build nothing for us. So building America and defeating fascism are not only complementary, they are prerequisites for each other. And abundance, fight oligarchy, and defeating fascism are one single movement to tear down incumbent privilege, build the ladder back up, and unleash the power and potential of our people.
You're listening to Radio Abundance, a podcast by YIMBY Democrats for America.
My name is Armand Damaluski. I recently co-founded a group called YIMBYs for Harris to support Kamala Harris's efforts to build a lot more affordable housing, which has now become YIMBY Democrats for America. Building more housing is the only way to make housing more affordable. Austin, Auckland, Tokyo, cities around the world, when they build more housing, we see rents go down, we see property prices in real terms stay flat and become more affordable. That is a fact. There's no country on earth, not even Vienna, which has built an amazing, beautiful amount of social housing, but not even Vienna was able to solve the crisis by purely 100% government-funded housing. You need both. Additionally, you cannot build affordable housing if it is not zoned for it. If you want to build dense, beautiful, affordable housing, there needs to be zoning capacity to do so. It currently costs $1 million a unit in San Francisco to build affordable housing. We are obligated to build 82,000 units. The entire budget of San Francisco is $15 billion a year. it would be $82 billion to have only that housing built by government subsidy. We need government-funded affordable housing. We also need market rate housing so that people can afford to stay and live in San Francisco. Democrats nationally are understanding this. Elizabeth Warren spoke at her event and talked about YIMBY.
Hello, YIMBYs. Senator Elizabeth Warren here. Housing is at the heart of American life. Our problem is basic Econ 101. We don't have enough housing, and that drives up costs and makes housing unaffordable. The answer? Pretty straightforward. Build more housing.
Barbara Lee spoke at her event and talked about it being a YIMBY.
We need more housing. Build more housing. Bring the cost down.
It is the progressive position to support building housing and upzoning to allow for the building of more housing. Thank you.
We need big solutions.
Our next interview is with Stephen Fulop. As mayor, he's made Jersey City one of this country's leaders in building new homes. Now he's running for governor of New Jersey. Please welcome to Radio Abundance Mayor Stephen Fulop. And to kick things off, here's his fellow Steve Boyle.
Well, Steve, we know you as the mayor of Jersey City, now a candidate for governor of New Jersey, and a leader of the YIMBY movement, who's seen some real amazing gains in Jersey City. So excited to chat today and learn a little bit more about you. And welcome to Radio Abundance.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here. I'm thankful that you guys are doing this. I think that the dialogue has changed over the last 3 years with regard to housing, and it's a lot to do with people like yourself. So I'm thankful that you guys are further promoting that.
How do you feel like you've seen change?
I feel like the conversation for the first time in the last 3 to 4 years has been about where market rate housing fits into the conversation around housing affordability. And you go back 5, 10 years, people would talk only about low income or affordable housing. What are you doing to build affordable housing? Affordable housing. And if you talked about market rate housing, it was kind of negative. And I think in the last couple of years, it's actually the dialogue has changed, where people are appreciating the fact that you got to be doing both in a thoughtful way to really solve some of the housing problems. So I think it's changed meaningfully. This wasn't possible 3 or 4 years ago in a Democratic conversation.
Yeah. And, as we'll talk about both market rate housing and public housing and affordable housing today, obviously as YIMBYs, we believe deeply in the idea that more market rate housing helps everybody and changes the equation around supply and demand. As Democrats, obviously, we want to solve problems as quickly as we can and intervene to support folks who are marginalized and low income and very vulnerable and keep a roof over their heads. And, as abundance folks, we believe it's all part of the solution, right? Markets and governments and governments being empowered to build as well. So we'll chat a little bit about public housing as well as market rate housing conversation. You're talking about the last 3 years. You've been, became mayor around 2013. So you
became mayor in 2013, and I ran on a very housing-centric platform at the time on how we were going to use some of the tools to encourage big housing away from the waterfront. And we've done that. I mean, if you go to the heart of the city, Journal Square, those of you that aren't familiar with Jersey City, if you're in New York City, you see the skyline across the river, that's Jersey City. And then on top of the hill, I mean, there's probably more high rises in a 2-block radius under construction there than anywhere else in the country. 6 or 7, 50, 60-story buildings under construction simultaneously from different developers. And all of that was kind of a byproduct of a vision that we had a long time ago to bring construction away from the waterfront.
Yeah. I think of the YIMBY movement as really beginning a lot with like Sonia Traus in San Francisco. And that timeline is also about 10 years ago. So how did you, and perhaps independently, how did you come to this viewpoint that market rate housing was part of the solution and part of achieving, even progressive and quite democratic goals?
I don't think at the time it was viewed as a kind of a progressive problem-solving component for housing by and large. I viewed it, though, as kind of common sense that New York City wasn't building enough housing, and it was putting pressure on housing in Jersey. And if you wanted to solve that, particularly Jersey City, you needed to build more supply. What I've learned along the way is that Jersey City can't do it by ourselves. I mean, we've built more than 3 of the boroughs across the river of the New York City boroughs, but it's still not enough when New York City isn't pulling its weight. So you kind of need a larger regional plan. When I came in, it was just kind of common sense on basic economics that if you have a supply problem, then prices will go up. And it's not rocket science. And so how do you deal with that with people that want to live in Jersey City because of arts, culture, or transportation?
It's a fascinating thing. I mean, you got New York City, perhaps the best city in the world, perhaps the best city in the country. And really, I think its most thriving borough right now is Jersey City. I don't know if you think of it that way. And I don't know if you want to taunt New York City a little bit, but tell me a little about that. I'm curious a little bit about
I think
identity.
I think we feel like, I think we feel like from an arts and culture standpoint, we have our own identity. We have the Centre Pompidou, which is the largest collection of modern art in all of Europe, moving to Jersey City. You have the Symphony, New Jersey State Symphony, moving their headquarters to Jersey City. You have a lot of arts and culture, a big arts community, vibrant the nightlife, and particularly restaurant scene that has propped up in the last 10 years. A lot of that is related to having a walkable city that is related to housing. So it's all intertwined at the end of the day. But we have built more than most of the boroughs of New York City. And we continue to build more. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the main reasons, Steve, is that we have less layers of government that could veto projects. So I think in New York City, for people that aren't familiar with it, you have community boards that can kill a project. You have borough presidents that could kill a project. You have planning boards that could kill a project. And all along the way, before you get into incentives that you might need to develop. And all those layers of government don't exist in places like Jersey City. In places that are doing it right, you don't have all of those opportunities for the NIMBY component to get in its way.
Yeah. And so now you're thinking about, running for governor of New Jersey. So different set of statewide challenges, different set of statewide voters. I'm curious, what advantages you have from Jersey City that can carry over to the state, and what new disadvantages might be new, and how you're thinking of confronting those.
So there's two things in New Jersey that are really front and center. So housing is a big conversation right now. And the advantage that I have on that front is that I have a track record and credibility because we built more than anybody else in New Jersey. So I can speak to it with more specifics than any of the other candidates. And it's not kind of platitude. It's, here's what I did concrete. And then, it's a front and center conversation because housing pressure in New Jersey, it's a densely populated state, and housing pressure is really significant. And at the same time, you have affordable housing mandates from the state that has been put on each municipality. So if you think in New Jersey, you have 560 plus municipalities, so a lot of layers of government. That 25, 30 years ago, via litigation, the state realized that housing segregation is a real thing. So we're going to require affordable housing in every municipality. And a lot of the municipalities have pushed back over time on that, but there's been plenty of litigation. So we're at a crossroads here where this governor's race is going to basically decide in some ways what the future of housing looks like in New Jersey because of these mandates. The Republicans are saying that they will go back to an old system where white affluent towns can pay urban areas to take their affordable housing obligation and not have any sort of housing. And what we speak to is more transit-oriented development and equity and equality throughout the state where everybody has some responsibility to build some housing. And then the state can interact in ways with incentivizing it. But that is the conversation on housing in this gubernatorial race. And it is a major, major talking point.
Yeah, I'm curious about transit, actually. A quote on your government, you write, or on your website, rather, you write, despite local governments having limited legal authority over New Jersey transportation, Jersey City found creative ways to build modes of transportation. So I'm curious, what are some of those creative ways?
So we launched in 2020 a microtransit system. So, it is kind of like a hybrid ride share. It's paid for by the municipal government. And the thought process was that New Jersey Transit, which is our bus system, was abandoning a lot of the low income communities. And we had to find a solution to kind of get these people access to mass transit. But if you think about buses overall, in some ways, it's kind of like an archaic way of thinking about transportation because, these huge vehicles that are not energy efficient or environmentally conscious, they move on a fixed route. So not dynamic at all. They move whether they have 50 people or 2 people at set schedules. Technology today, you could think of Uber, is dynamic where you can have the car pick you up. Technology and algorithms can recognize when you and I are headed in the same direction. So the rideshare system is based on very large vans that recognize dynamically when multiple people are headed in a same direction. We'll tell them that the pickup place is within 2 blocks of their home. So the route is flexible and only going when there's demand. And it has been hugely successful. It is now the most successful microtransit system in the country. We've done 2.5 million rides in the last 4 years. And those are things that you could replicate, I think, statewide. And you see more development where there's more access to transportation, obviously. So figuring out that is related to the housing conversation.
It's a really fascinating sort of equation there when you think about like how you combine market forces and kind of real-time adjustments to demand to then deliver what in this case is a public service, right? Where you're using that kind of real-time adjustment to what people need to route the ride fares. And I was just I'm from San Jose. There the light rail workers are on strike, and the mayor of San Jose, Matt Mahan, wrote an op-ed where he was talking about in a sort of interim period, giving vouchers to commuters to take rideshare. And he pointed out that for San Jose right now, it's cheaper to pay their light rail commuters to take an Uber than it is per ride to operate their service. So I'm interested to learn more about both the economics and the sort of the philosophy behind a technology-based and demand-based and real-time adjusting transport system.
Yeah, so we post quarterly stats in detail, obviously every 3 months, and they break down everything from who's using it, how frequent, how many new riders, what the wait time is, where the pickup locations are. So you get a feel for that. It's working by the sense that so many people are using it. Number one, we see that increasing every quarter. And if you take a step back, you recognize that the technology is there to facilitate these sort of things that weren't there 40 years ago. So you should be thinking about transportation in a different sort of way. And I don't think enough municipalities do that.
Yeah. Now, on the car front, here we are, some urbanists talking about cars, right? And there's been, as you point out, huge developments in cars, whether that's rideshare technology, whether that's self-driving cars, whether that's electric cars. In 2022, your administration had a pretty massive accomplishment, which is across Jersey City on city-owned streets, 0 people died in car crashes. Which is amazing. In terms of both the death toll of driving, as well as just the geometric challenges of if you have a lot of people and they're each in a car, that's clog up traffic. I'm curious about how you think about the future of cars, both in cities like Jersey City and and across states in the country.
So the car conversation has in Jersey City changed pretty significantly. Let me just start there. We used to require 1 parking space for every unit. We changed that. It's less than, it's 0.25 now or less. In most developments, we don't require parking now, and is what we're doing because we're investing in mass transit. And then at the same time, you touched on, we really leaned into Vision Zero. We were the first city of the top 100 in or the most densely populated 100 in the country to achieve Vision Zero, which is driving traffic-related fatalities down to 0. How do we do it? A lot of street redesigns, a lot of bike lanes, protected bike lanes, a lot of rethinking of how cars move around the city, complete streets where possible that contemplate pedestrians as well as buses, as well as bikes and cars. And all of those things have led themselves to dropping the number of fatalities per year by like 90%. So in 2022, we reached 0, but it's been consistently 90 to 95% lower than what it was when we started. So it's a thing that we're very proud of. And I think, again, it's something that you could replicate statewide, because a lot of the statewide roads beyond the highways do have major problems that you contemplate making them safer.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's one of the most amazing things you can accomplish, right? When we think about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or we talk about more nuts and bolts things like the cost of living, it begins with life. And, in the U.S., every day, enough people die in car crashes to fill a 747. And I feel like if every day a passenger airplane went down and along with everyone in it, that would probably, and it seemed like for a second that might happen. I feel like that would prompt some changes and some thinking about how we approach transportation. So I'm curious. You listed how you were able to accomplish that in Jersey City. How are you thinking about that goal as you think of the state?
So look, I think first of all, the investment in mass transit is key. So people take personal vehicles because they feel that the mass transit system in New Jersey doesn't work the way it should be. So the first thing is you need to kind of correct New Jersey Transit, which is the backbone of both trains and buses for the state of New Jersey, both problematic. So I think, you can't really make people or encourage people not to use their cars until you've kind of thought through an alternative solution. So that's number one. Number two is Phil Murphy this year adopted Vision Zero, similar to what we did in 2019. He's starting at 10 major intersections, just contemplating how to make those a little bit safer and redesign them. I think there are 100 that need to be addressed, so it needs a larger commitment to it. But look, it's data-driven, it's not rocket science. I mean, you look at the way we've done in Jersey City is you start with the places that have had the highest number of fatalities and crashes, and then you just chip away at it every year. We're doing a significant number of them, and that's why we got to, in 4 years, to turn the corner, so to speak, around Vision Zero. But the same thing at the state. It's not rocket science. It's the same exact thing. Approach it the same way.
Yeah. And when it comes to public transportation, I'm curious about your ambitions for the state of New Jersey, both in terms of what you want to take on and how you think about the cost of building that infrastructure.
The biggest opportunity on mass transit is that there's already a huge amount of capital money allocated to a widening of the turnpike. And so the turnpike is kind of the major artery for cars in New Jersey, and it goes through Hudson County at one point and enters into the Holland Tunnel, which is the access point between New York and New Jersey, or one of them. And the state of New Jersey under Phil Murphy allocated $12 billion would be to widen that turnpike. And they said at the time that the main reason that they were going to do that was to alleviate traffic. And what I've said repeatedly is that it's not a project that makes a lot of sense in a congested state where you're trying to eliminate use of cars and encourage mass transit. You should be investing those dollars in mass transit, and let alone a turnpike widening won't help. You could widen the turnpike to 25 lanes. If the Holland Tunnel remains 2 lanes, you have that bottleneck that still exists. Nothing changes. And so what I've been saying repeatedly is that, similar to what Wes or Governor Moore did in Maryland, is reallocating money away from the streets and turnpike and highway widening more to mass transit. And I think that we could solve some of the light rail issues that exist today in New Jersey. The beauty of the challenges on transportation for New Jersey is that, yeah, they're significant, but a lot of the money that I want to allocate is already allocated. So the biggest project in New Jersey right now, infrastructure project, is a $12 billion project to widen the turnpike, which is a major highway that goes through Hudson County and eventually into the Holland Tunnel into New York City. And the state allocated $12 billion to widen this. And from the beginning, I said it was poor use of money because we should be investing money in mass transit because we're so densely populated. And secondly, common sense indicates that you're never going to alleviate some of that traffic pressure, because it doesn't matter if you widen the turnpike to 20 lanes, the Holland Tunnel is still 2 lanes, the bottleneck. So you're going to waste a lot of money and not achieve the goal. Similar to what the governor of Maryland did when he was elected, I would reallocate dollars towards mass transit, particularly light rail expansion for Bergen County, which is north of Hudson, and then South Jersey, much discussed Camden and Gloucester, more light rail infrastructure. So the thought is that the state was already allocated those dollars towards infrastructure projects, and the governor has the flexibility to reappropriate those dollars. And I would actually maximize that and take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah. Now, since we're talking about transportation, I think that brings me to abundance more generally. We formed as YIMBY Democrats for America. We're certainly focused on housing, but fans of the wider concept of abundance, whether that's housing, transportation, but also energy, maybe healthcare and education. I'm curious from that standpoint. Have you read the book? Do you have any thoughts on the wider movement? You've obviously been living it for a long time. I'm curious how this same sort of approach to housing connects to other segments of both the market and the public services that government provides.
Look, I think that we're in a crazy time. When I started to run for governor, I thought a lot about these challenges around abundance and opportunity and exposure and access in New Jersey, not anticipating that you'd have a federal government that didn't cooperate with a lot of these things, that ideologically that would be in such a different place. So what I can tell you is I feel like from the governor's standpoint, this election is crucial. There's 2 governors races in the country this year, one in Virginia, one in New Jersey. They're going to be a bellwether for how we feel about, President Trump and the administration in Washington and policies that he's promoting or not promoting. And so major crossroads. So our campaign is about more than core democratic values. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do, and governors are going to be the front or the first line of defense around healthcare and housing and transportation. And we're very detailed on it.
Yeah, I mean, it really will be up to you and if you're a governor and of course your fellow governors to both demonstrate an alternative and prove out what that looks like. I'm curious, and now we move from we have two missions, right? We have build America and defeat fascism, and now we sort of move from the happy, optimistic, urbanist part of our conversation to dealing with the times we're in. Your mother was the daughter of Holocaust.
Yeah.
Today we're seeing legal residents who, with views the administration doesn't like, rounded up and disappeared by men in masks. We're seeing random Latinos with tattoos that honor their kids plucked off the streets and sent to Salvadorian concentration camps. So, around the country, you got folks asking, what can Democratic leaders do? What can governors do? What can the party do? And what can just ordinary folks out there be doing themselves to stand up to this?
Yeah, people are frustrated and they want to see fighters, obviously. I think that, on the immigration conversation, because I get it that, you have a lot of independents and Republicans that say, we should get rid of these people. It shouldn't be here. And I tell them that when the raids started in Newark, New Jersey, one of them was my father's store that was raided. He has a building there with 4 units. It used to be a deli and my mom's immigration services business. And then, as they retired, they sold it. And it's currently 4 units. One is a Irvington school teacher. One is an Army veteran. One is a lawyer who took over for my mom's immigration services business. And one is an electrical contractor for the state of New Jersey. So all documented citizens that are professionals here and have served in some way from actually a public service standpoint. And ICE came and, I posted the videos. There were 15 of them and they went door to door. They were looking for somebody. I don't know if somebody might have used that address or whatever. They didn't arrest anybody, but I always point out to people that if you look at the video and how they came in, and my parents and my family who owns that building are citizens and they've been there for 50 years and I'm running for governor. So fairly high profile in the state. And they come in with no warrants or no due process and they go door to door searching for people. And we're in dangerous times if you tolerate that sort of thing. Because if it could happen to somebody like me, it could happen to you, Steve, of course, it could happen to anybody. And where does that end? Because it doesn't end once you accept it. So I think that there's a lot of things that you can do on the state front. People call their federal reps, which is great and it feels good, but it's such a gerrymandered world in Washington and you have Republicans in every branch that it's hard to get change. But I do think that on the state level, particularly in New Jersey, there are things that we should be pushing our Democratic State Senate, Democratic State Assembly, Democratic governor to do. Like we have a thing called the Immigrant Trust Act, which protects immigrants. We have some stuff on gender identity that we should be pushing forward, women's reproductive rights. We should be talking about, some of these governors drawing down on surpluses to offset, Medicaid cuts or vulnerable communities. So there are things you should be pushing your state legislature and your governors to do. I don't think we do that enough.
Yeah. And for folks outside of government and maybe who've never been involved, with any kind of activism or organizing before, but they're looking for what they can be doing, what can ordinary folks do right now?
What could they be doing? I think holding accountable the first level of government, which are your state representatives, which are the first line of defense. I think it's a good thing to continue to criticize and put pressure on your federal representatives. They probably won't feel that pressure until they see some more election results. I mean, look, you saw some this week that were smaller state Senate races that swung Democrat and Republican districts. But, we won't know what that really feels like until you see more of those. And then Republicans in swing districts get scared. Then you get more accountability by making phone calls. I don't think we're there yet. But I think the priority should be pushing your first line of defense, which are your governors and your state representatives.
Yeah. You talked earlier about why the Democratic Party needs fighters. There's more in your background than just building housing. I know that on September 11th, you were in Lower Manhattan. You saw the plane. You joined the U.S. Marine Corps as you were deployed to Iraq from 2003 to 2006. I can tell you, I am also someone who has witnessed the carnage of terrorism with my own eyes, right? I was aboard one of the trains on the London Underground that Al Qaeda attacked in 2005. So,
What was that like? You were down there in the tube over there when that happened?
I was, and that's I don't want to take too much of our conversation to tell you about myself, but the answer is yeah. I was taking a train to an apprenticeship one day, and that train, first there was a big noise, and then everything stopped, and I thought we just hit a wall, and the lights went out, the emergency lights flickered on, the train started to fill with smoke. Everybody kind of tucked their mouths into their shirts, and for a little while, we were in kind of a waiting period, and then we opened one of the doors, and I was the closest to one of the doors. And right outside the door, there was a woman, and I'm thrilled to say that she lived, but I didn't know that for many years, who's had been thrown from the bombed car, whose legs had been severed by the tracks, and who was on the tracks next to the train. And so, I've had the experience of looking someone in the eyes as the blood poured out of them and trying to console them. I've walked past in order to exit that tunnel, the bodies of people who never left it. So, I am obviously deeply admire that you answered the call to service. And I'm curious to learn just a little bit more about, your experience in Iraq and also what you learned about both keeping America safe and living up to our values as we do it.
Yeah, so similar, saw some of this firsthand. I was on the trading floor for Goldman Sachs. You could feel the building shake when the planes hit. We evacuated. And then it kind of struck a chord in me where there's a lot of patriotism, and I viewed it at the time as kind of a partial payment for citizenship. I went to my managers at Goldman Sachs and said I was going to leave and enlist in the Marine Corps. They thought I was crazy, that people with Goldman don't normally do that. And but for me, it was kind of like a dead ode. My family came here as immigrants, Holocaust survivors, and I thought it was important. So went down to Paris Island on the enlistment side, spent a bunch of months there, boot camp, and then off with that first wave of troops out to Kuwait and then into Iraq up to Baghdad. And my primary responsibility there was part of combat engineers building fuel farms all the way up to Baghdad to get fuel and water. We were amongst the front line there, but everybody has an MOS, or a responsibility is the way it works. And, look, I look back at those 6 months. It was a good growing experience for me. I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about other people. And I'm thankful I made that decision. And that ultimately led me to kind of indirectly to the life that I'm in now. I wasn't registered to vote or involved in this, but when I came back, the mayor of Jersey City at the time wanted to just give me a proclamation, and one thing led to another. And he asked me to run kind of a suicide mission against Bob Menendez, who now is convicted for bribery. And tell people, I told you in 2005, he was a bad guy, but I went on this suicide mission because I thought it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I registered to vote when I declared for Congress on this mission. And, look, it opened my eyes to the needs and opportunity. And I figured that public service at that point was more of a calling for me than financial service. And that kind of led me to where I am. And then I've always kind of ran these races outside of the political system, against the grain. And especially when I ran for mayor, the entire party apparatus in the state was against me. We were successful. And then we've changed the city, and I'm running a similar campaign for governor.
Yeah. It does seem, it's maybe just coincidence, but so far for this podcast, we talked to Governor Westmore of Maryland. We talked to his Secretary of Housing and Community Development, Jake Day. We talked to Congressman Jake Auchincloss. And all three of them, along with you, are veterans. And we're in a moment where we're seeing the Trump administration cast a lot of veterans to the side, and maybe they don't care about those suckers and losers. And I also see a lot of veterans mobilizing right now for against Trump and against fascism, and for not just the Democratic Party, but for America. And I'm curious if you see any kind of connection. I'm sure you do, between both that work and some of this specific approach to what the next era of America needs. And yeah, look, I think the fact that, Democrats don't raise enough their relationship and with the military, their appreciation, the fact that Democrats have consistently increased funding and support for veterans and veteran services and VAs. And
it always feels like that the military base gravitates more towards the Republicans. And especially when you have a leader that says things over time that undermines appreciation, it's a crazy thing to think about. I think we have a lot of good ambassadors today. Justin Westmore, I've known him a long time. He's a terrific ambassador as it relates to the next generation of Democratic leaders. And he's going to go much further, I think, than where he is today. And he's a military veteran, appreciate that. He wears that proudly. He talks about it all the time, as I do. But look, I think like this country's at a major crossroads in so many ways. And the appreciation and how we talk about military and veterans is one component of it. And I think as Democrats, we need to continue to elevate veterans and veteran elected officials, because I think it goes at a core argument of the Republicans.
Thinking of that connection between the military and kind of the progressive worldview, it's not something we think about a lot or talk about a lot, but it's a little bit of a pet issue of mine. And that 2003 to 2006 range in Iraq is really interesting, because I think of that war starting from my outsider perspective with quite a lot of arrogance and mistakes from the Bush administration. And then, leading up to 2006 and that kind of, we think of the surge and we think of General Petraeus, you often think of a bunch of new troops and some of the scandals that followed next. I am always fascinated by the philosophical shift that happened in the military around the idea of counterinsurgency and the questions of, starting to ask, what did you do for the people of Iraq today? And how do you protect the civilian population? And how do you build up state capacity and public life? Again, when people think of Petraeus, they don't think building theaters, but we did. We built eventually in Iraq, arts centers and different ways for people to sway people from believing that they had to follow the progenitors of violence and authoritarians and people insinuating chaos, and that there was an option for them in public, civilian, thriving life. I'm curious if you saw any of that, if you were too early for that, if that would
look. When I was there, it went through a couple of phases. If you remember, when I was there, so this first 6 months we were seen largely as liberators, and then over time it turned into more of kind of an occupier sentiment. And you had a lot of roadside bombs, and it was a very dangerous time. And then we did a lot of rebuilding, which, if you think about today on some of the talking points that even like Donald Trump talks about funding foreign countries and aid, goes back to, again, what types of things are we building and resources versus here, kind of this polarization conversation. And so I wasn't there for a lot of those things. I think that those decisions from 2003 to 2008 are still manifesting itself today in today's political climate. We don't talk about Iraq as much. We don't talk about what we spend elsewhere in other governments and how we're spending them and why not here. That's changed over time. So I think Democrats, we need to just make a better argument over time on the things that are happening.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of why not spend here and keeping on this topic a little bit, it's obviously weird to connect counterinsurgency strategy in Iraq with how we think about cities today or how we stand up to Trump. But I do see a connection in the sense of, if you do want people to think there's more of an option than authoritarians and more of an option than violence, then they need public safety, they need arts and culture and things to do. You mentioned earlier the arts sector. It's very personal to me. I came up as a theater maker and still am a creator of like big immersive theater experiences. You talked on your website, you hail Jersey City's nonprofit arts and culture sector generating like 46 million in economic activity every year with 500 jobs and 28 million go into city residents. So I'm curious about how you think about just building up, whether that's state capacity or public amenities or just the sort of culture and vibrancy of people being around each other in public life. Your role.
Steve, I was going to touch on something, just finishing that thought around fascism and kind of the conversation today and going back to 2003 to 2008, when you think about, the Donald Trump campaigns from 2016 in last year, in many ways, it's him capitalizing on NAFTA and angry middle America from 20 years ago, from the Bill Clinton era, right? And people are still very, very mad about, and rightfully so in many cases, about displacement of jobs and opportunity and all of those things. But that anger that he's capitalized can be directly tied to NAFTA and the decisions on outsourcing. And you think about kind of where we are today and, urbanization and technology and AI and all of the things that are just about to change job losses and job creation and how people live exponentially. NAFTA is going to seem like nothing. You see what I'm saying? And I don't think we talk about that stuff enough because, we were talking about kind of where we are in the political world right now. You got to think about what's next. And I think Democrats have a talking point there that could be more important about how do we deal with the massive amount of job loss that's imminent in the next 5 years because of the change in technology. Just one other thing in Jersey City, we started a month ago, we have these robot deliveries now experimenting with Uber. We have, I think, 15 of them downtown Jersey City experimenting with 5 restaurants. You see them driving on the street, on the sidewalk, they have smiley faces on the front of them. And the technology is crazy. And so I think that we would be smart to start thinking about job displacement and how do we train and help those families that are on the precipice of getting that sort of lifestyle change. People want to live in urban areas, a lot of job opportunities there. I think we'd be smart to capitalize on some of that stuff.
Thinking about the party then, we talked a lot about, we think a lot about how both market rate housing and reducing the regulations and permitting around that can help achieve big goals and democratic goals. And I also think a lot about how, market rate housing helps fund democratic programs and how whether it's public housing and affordable housing interventions or other social programs. I think a lot about how that same kind of allowing citizens to build, those same rules help allow governments to build and achieve progressive goals. So I'm curious about how you think about some of the more progressive goals or democratic goals that you have, especially around building public housing or affordable housing, and also how the wider picture of whether that's abundance or aggressive building up of market housing, how that supports it as well.
So I think, I don't know if every state has the same challenge. In New Jersey, with these affordable housing obligations, you've had a lot of NIMBYs that have adopted control the narrative municipality by municipality. And some of it is rooted in fair and reasonable criticism or skepticism. And some of it is racism around not wanting to have what they view as affordable housing, because people have a different reaction. If I say we're building affordable housing, they react one way. If I say I'm building housing that's affordable, they react a totally different way, right? And that speaks to the core issue that we have. I think as governor, one of the things that I talk about is, you got to create more transparency around municipality versus municipality on where they are in their affordable housing obligations or housing obligations. So that way you wrestle the narrative away from the NIMBYs. You got to create the opportunity where people to see that my mayor or my elected official is costing me millions of dollars in fighting litigation after litigation, housing development that isn't productive. So that's number one. And I think that as governor, what's different that how I approach it is I think that you need to have a carrot and a stick. You need to have a governor that ties financial resources from Trenton directly correlated to housing growth. And that's the only way you're going to motivate a mayor or municipal government to actually want to grow and build. And being a mayor, from that experience, I think I have a background and track record of doing those sort of things.
Yeah, you talked about, and this is from your website again, you say, New Jersey currently builds only about 2,700 units of affordable housing annually. You got 225,000 units shorted. It would take more than 80 years at that pace to hit it. We were talking recently with Zellnor Myrie, who's running for mayor of New York City. He wants to build 1 million units over the next decade. Had a really interesting idea around, public housing that was not just mixed income, but mixed use, where on the one hand, you're having the city build market rate housing that then helps subsidize and affordable housing, as well as having, schools and libraries, not just for the land, but in the same building and being able to expand public amenities that way as well.
We are actually doing that in Jersey City. The largest public housing reconstruction project in the state of New Jersey is a project under our administration in Jersey City at the Jersey Housing Authority. It's probably 500 plus units, and it is a partnership with the Housing Authority and a private developer. It is a mixed income community with all of the low income units being returned mixed in with market units. A library is at the base of that. And then there is a handful, I think 10 or 15 home ownership units as part of that project. It really is something significant. If somebody wants to Google it, it's Holland Gardens in Jersey City. And I think we're at the forefront of that conversation. It's been a long road, and we've implemented the strongest right of return for all of those current residents. So, you have a community there in these low-income housing sites that, have been neglected. They feel like government hasn't worked for them. Their places are largely dilapidated and not cared for like they should be. And so when we started this project, there was a great deal of skepticism. So we've gone a long, long way to making sure that every single resident, when those new units are built that look like market rate units, but are low income housing, that they have the opportunity to return. It's going to be an amazing thing right across the river from New York.
That's pretty special. We got to wrap in a second. So I just want to give you two little questions to finish this off.
Yeah.
The first is, what haven't I asked about that either you're eager to talk about or is a pet issue of yours, or that whether it's the party or people at home that folks should know?
I think you covered a lot. We're at a major crossroads here as a state, in particular, for those people that live in New Jersey, on affordability. And affordability is tied to housing, which is tied to transportation. So all these issues are intertwined. And clearly, we're at a crossroads in the country because you have a federal government that doesn't believe in a lot of the things that I think are common sense around climate change and sustainability. And the next 4 years are really important. Governors will be the front line of defense. And it's important that New Jersey chooses wisely June 10th.
Nice. It's been such a treat to chat with you for this hour. It's been exciting to watch your work. I think 15 years ago, Jersey City was 1% of the total permitted units in buildings in the states, and now it's nearly 10%.
A little bit more, I think.
A little bit more. Incredible. Anything? First of all, congratulations. Second of all, appreciate the time. And third of all, what do you want to leave folks with, both to consider and for folks to know who might want to figure out how to support you in the next?
I think that the best thing is, I'll just plug the website, Stephen Fulop, STEVENF as in Foxtrot, ULOP as in Papa, StephenFulop.com. So please check it out. There's a lot on housing there and transportation. And, I think we're in a good spot to win June 10th and then in November.
Very cool. Mayor Fulop, thanks so much for sitting down with us today and joining us on Radio Abundance.
Thank you so much.
All right. That was Stephen Fulop, mayor of Jersey City, running for governor of New Jersey.
He's awesome. Mayor Fulop has been like a YIMBY before YIMBY was a thing. Like Jersey City built so much housing. New York City's like housing crisis would be way worse if like Jersey City did not exist. The amount of people I know who work in New York but live in Jersey City is huge. And it's not just like, oh, they built a lot of housing. It's like dense, near transit, infill. Like they've done a lot of like transit improvements, pedestrian improvements. It's quietly one of the most YIMBY cities in America.
He did not like it when I called Jersey City the sixth borough of New York. But I did. In my time living in New York, I did spend about 3 months in Jersey City and absolutely loved it because you were close to everything I wanted to go to. It was closer to anything I wanted to go to than I would have been in Astoria. You had a burgeoning city. You could be by the waterfront, which I remember being able to like leave Manhattan, but look at Manhattan and gaze at the skyline, but also look at the water. And there were like geese, was really lovely. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening there in terms of the scene that, and Mayor Fulop's leaned really hard into the art scene there. I really think he's laid out a model for what New York City and its 5 boroughs could be doing in New York, because right now they're getting lapped by Jersey City. And to the extent that Mayor Fulop doesn't like me calling Jersey City the 6th borough of New York, I have to also think New Yorkers will not like me saying they're getting their butts kicked by Jersey City. So let's stoke that New York-New Jersey rivalry and get some buildings built.
Well, in Jersey actually reminds me a lot of the relationship between San Francisco and Oakland, and that people will say, because like Oakland for a while was actually more aggressive on like YIMBYism than San Francisco. And people would say, like, well, Oakland's so expensive. And it's because cities like San Francisco, which built a lot of office, had a lot of economic development, were relying on their neighbors to basically like pick up the slack on housing. And Jersey City is really like carrying New York City to make it more affordable, which means that like New York has to embrace, I think, more of the ideas that Jersey City does.
And Mayor Fulop, as you mentioned, Armand, he is an OG YIMBY. He was in it before it had a name. And he's also an OG YIMBY Democrat for America, both in his actual work and as a great part of YIMBYs for Harris. So that relationship goes back. He was a big supporter, somebody always saying, hey, how can I throw in? How can I help? Which I think is exciting. How did you, Armand, first connect with him?
I think I first tweeted at him or something like that. And I've been tweeting about his housing stuff for a while, praising his work, talking how New Jersey is like picking up the slack for New York. And when he heard about this, he was just really excited to participate. I think in particular because he was running for governor, planning to run for governor, and the race is like pretty close. He's a clear number 2. So I really want folks to get the word out about him, make sure that people know about him, donate to him, all that stuff, because this is very much like, the Zellnor race is different in that the key there is to sort of get something like a New York Times endorsement that'll make him pop to people's radar. With Fulop, there's an incumbent, like there's another candidate who's like leading, but it's not that much. And so really like he just needs the push to get over the top. And all of that comes from just word of mouth, social media, and helping him get the money he needs to spread the word.
There was one more thing about Stephen Fulop, in addition to all of what he's accomplished, right? In addition to taking Jersey City from 1% of all the building permits issued in New Jersey to now more than 10%, making Vision Zero actually have 0 traffic deaths on his streets. He's done a lot. There's a lot he can do for New Jersey. It also seems really interesting to me that Stephen Fulop is a veteran. So Stephen Fulop, as we talked about in the interview, is somebody who watched 9/11 happen with his own eyes. And it's interesting to me that Stephen Fulop is a veteran, and all 3 of our guests last week, Governor Wes Moore in Maryland, Secretary of Housing for Maryland, Jake Day, and Congressman Jake Auchincloss, all 3 of them are veterans as well. And they're all between about 37 and 48 years old. They're all that generation that either came of age around or right after 9/11, said, I want to do something. I want to serve my country, committed to both, keeping America safe, wanted to build a better life for people around the world, and also emerged and perhaps went in deeply disillusioned with the Bush administration, came back to the U.S. and started nation building here. They're building here. They're building up America. They are fighters. They are Democrats, and they are builders. And I think this isn't a coincidence. And I also think it is part of the path forward for the Democratic Party, because you'll notice, in just this year, right, the amount of slashing of government employees that Donald Trump and Elon Musk have done means throwing a lot of veterans out of government and a lot of veterans out of their job. And I think there's a lot of those folks, who fought for this country, who are fighters by nature, who are deeply committed to this nation and to our democracy and to our people. And I think as we think about who's going to emerge as a brand new, never before heard of candidate in 2026 and beyond, I think a lot of Democratic veterans are going to maybe lead the way, both in saying what is real patriotism, what does it mean to stand up to the Trump administration, and also what does it mean to build America and build a more progressive future for us. I think a lot of veterans can lead the way on that.
I mean, I think being a veteran, especially of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, you will see the U.S. military drop into like nothing and build a giant base in way faster time than it takes us to build like a duplex in the United States. So I think there are people who really understand like what government can do on a scale, what scale it can do when it really decides to do.
Yeah, state capacity can't just be for the military. And it can't just be for people from other nations. We know a thing or two about the fact that to win hearts and minds abroad, you have to build civic life and arts and civic culture. And I think it's too easily forgotten at home how important that is to our own culture and our own civic fabric.
You've been listening to Radio Abundance. Join the movement for progressive abundance at yimbydemocrats.org. Yes, we can build again. Yes, we can trounce the fascists. Yes, you can be the difference. This is AI, by the way. You think these jokers actually got Obama? Check in with me in a few months. It'll happen.
Thank you for listening to Radio Abundance, a new podcast by YIMBY Democrats for America. Now it's time for you to join the movement. We're building a big tent, and it's going to take all of us. Join us, and together we'll fight to build America, defeat fascism, and unleash the era of progressive abundance. Join the movement at yimbydemocrats.org.
We used to do big things in New York City. We built the Empire State Building in 13 months. This is New York City. Come on now.
We have built more than most of the boroughs of New York City. It's not rocket science.
Smaller developers are often people of color. They're often women.
This governor's race is going to decide what the future of housing looks like in New Jersey.
People are expecting the Democratic Party to deliver for them in this moment.
I have a track record and credibility. We built more than anybody else in New Jersey.
Not just to pay them lip service, but to actually provide solutions to their everyday problems, to help bring down the cost of living.
The next 4 years are really important. Governors will be the front line of defense.
That is what my vision for this city is.
It's important that New Jersey chooses wisely.
We can go in a different direction. If you want to help me get there, Zellnor.nyc.
Stephen Fulop, Steven, F as in Foxtrot, ULOP as in Papa, StephenFulop.com.
Our problem is basic Econ 101. We don't have enough housing, and that drives up costs and makes housing unaffordable. The answer? Pretty straightforward. Build more housing.
When the 2030 census hits, California will lose 4 electoral votes, meaning every year, every presidential election, we could sweep the blue wall, win every state we won in 2020, and lose every election until 2044.
Austin, Auckland, Tokyo, cities around the world, when they build more housing, we see rents go down.
If we go that long, will we get another shot? Will we see another Democratic president? Will the Republic endure?
It is the progressive position to support building housing.
Billions of people not yet born are counting on us to do something as simple as to say yes to new homes and welcome to new neighbors.